Alright, this is Nate Story with Bright Agrotech here, and today I'm going to talk a lot about biological surface area. So biological surface area just basically describes the amount of surface area inside your system that microbes can live on and oxidize materials and mineralize things and basically do all of the work that needs to be done to oxidize ammonia and nitrification and your mineralization processes, and just kind of to improve the health and maintain the health of your aquaponics system. So BSA, or biological surface area, is usually measured in the number of square feet, okay, per system. All right, so this is a measure of how many square feet we have in the entire system. Now, to get this measurement, we have to know a few things. We have to know something called specific surface area. Or SSA, okay? And this is a measurement of the number of square feet, okay, per cubic foot. Or now, this can kind of be a little bit confusing, but basically what we're measuring is we're measuring the amount of square footage there is inside of a type of media. So we're basically, in a certain volume, if you have a handful of rock, of river rock in your hand, how many square feet of surface area is inside of that volume, okay? So if we measured the surface area of each of those individual rocks inside my hands, and we added all of those up, we would end up with our specific surface area if we knew the volume of rock in my hands. So a lot of folks will just kind of add up the surfaces of their tanks and of their pipes and do all that. That's fine, but it's really going to be pretty negligible when you compare it to the specific surface area or the total square footage in the volume of media that you're using. So if you're using a media bed, you're using crushed granite, or you're using sand, or you're using, like we do, a non-woven plastic media, it's good for us to know what our specific surface area of those materials is. If we know what the specific surface area is, we can basically multiply that by the volume of our grow bed, or the volume of our towers, or the volume of whatever type of growing technique we're using, and we can calculate our biological surface area. And that will basically tell us if we're overstocked or understocked, and kind of what the limitations of our system will be. So what I'm going to do for you real quick right here is I'm going to list the specific surface area of a few different common materials used in aquaponic systems that will allow you guys to do this calculation really easily. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to run through the calculation real quick. It's super simple, really easy math. Anyone can do it. So 1 second, I'll be right back with a table of specific surface areas. So what we're looking here is medium grain sand. We've got our media type, we've got our size, okay, our diameter in inches, and this is pretty rough again. Our specific surface area, square feet per cubic foot, and void ratio. And this basically just describes the amount of void there is between these different particles, okay? This is important because it tells us how fast water can move through it. It's related to the hydraulic connectivity, but it also, another thing to keep in mind is pore space. So on sand, these spaces are really poor. These voids are very tiny, so they capture solids really easily, and they get anaerobic, and pretty soon they're a big stinky mess. So on something like sand, it's a poor choice for an aquaponic media because it will just foul up really quickly. Same thing with pea gravel, okay? Pea gravel is pretty bad as well. We're looking for larger voids, okay? More void ratio is better, and especially more void ratio when the voids themselves are quite a bit larger. So that's usually why people are going with things like crushed granite, okay? So 3/4 inch crushed granite. But let's just run through these numbers real quick. For pea gravel, so this would be, like somewhere in the 1/4 to 1/2 inch size. You see this one's about 1/2 inch. And these are usually like round pea gravel, roughly round. We have a specific surface area of 85 square feet per cubic foot of pea gravel. So in 1 cubic foot, if you were to measure out a cubic foot of pea gravel, there would be 85 square feet of surface area. In sand, you see that's way higher because the particle size is a lot smaller. And 3/4 inch crushed granite, because it's more angular, okay, we get a little bit more specific surface area out of it, even though it is a larger particle size, because it's angular and it's kind of you know, it's not really round. And the void ratio, you know, you see starting here, you can discount sand altogether, but starting here, what we start to see is with the larger size, we usually end up with just a little bit more void ratio as we get bigger with our media. So you know, as we go to 3/4 inch crushed granite, we get up around closer to 35%. With river rock, 1 inch, okay, we're up around 40%. And that basically just means these big particles, the way they kind of set together, you end up with bigger gaps between them. Makes sense, right? So this is kind of, this stuff here is the traditional media types. And this will allow you to kind of do calculations based on volume. We, of course, use something different altogether. We use actually a fiber media, our Zip Grow Matrix media. And you can see here, the nice thing about this is that it gives us about the specific surface area of sand. So lots of biological reactivity, okay? We can get tons of microbes growing on this media, but our void ratio is 91%. So it's basically taking that aggregate idea and we're flipping it inside out, and we're using these long skinny fibers with lots of surface area and lots of void ratio. So it means that it's lightweight, that the water moves through it really quickly, but it is just covered in microbes. So these are basically the calculations we're going to use right here when we do our BSA calculations. All right, so in any system, bare minimum, you need around 2.5 square feet of biological surface area per gallon of water, okay? And that's at low stocking densities and relatively low feeding rates, okay? So that's the bare minimum. I would not recommend starting off with that for anyone. That's, you know, if you're stocking fish, say at like 1 pound per 10 gallons, then for every pound of fish, you'd basically want 25 square feet of biological surface area. That's what you're going to need basically to process the waste and to process that ammonia-rich water and keep your system healthy. So there's a lot of leeway here based on the age of the system. Older systems are going to be more efficient at processing that waste because the microbial communities are well established, they're thick, they're operating well, they're under optimal conditions, and the system itself is just more stable. Younger systems are going to need more biological surface area off the bat to do the job. And honestly, if you don't have establishment yet, you know, of your microbial communities, of your nitrifying bacteria, it doesn't matter how much you have, you're not going to have good nitrification. Makes sense, right? So to do that calculation, you kind of already got that baseline number, 2.5 square feet minimum. Now I would recommend closer to 10 square feet, okay, minimum per gallon of water, or about 100 square feet per pound of fish in your system in that area. So if we know we need 100 square feet per pound of fish, we can start to work with these numbers to figure out what kind of biological surface area is going to be required in our systems to keep everything healthy. So once we know these numbers and we know what it's going to take to have a healthy system, we can basically kind of go back and figure out with each media how much fish at a certain volume it will support well. And again, you know, most IBC systems fall in this range, okay? Most IBC systems fall in the 25 square feet of biological surface area range, just with the volume of most grow beds, just for your standard IBC system. Most kind of customized systems, and once you start adding grow beds onto IBC systems, or, you know, like in our greenhouse, we're operating actually at much higher than this even. You can't really overdo it with BSA. Okay, you can't have too much of this stuff. I'm sure there is a point, but it's so far out there that no one's ever hit it. You want to shoot for as much biological system area in your system as possible, because this is really the heart of your system. It's the motor that runs the system. Your microbes are doing all of your work for you, so the more of them you have, the more efficient your system can be at processing waste. So in our system, we're operating much higher than this, actually, and we can essentially get full oxidation of all of our ammonia within an hour or two of feeding. So basically, all it takes is a single cycle of that water to fully remove all of that ammonia. We can basically, that gives us the ability to bump up our nitrates. In the morning, if we feed really heavily, we can 3 or 4 hours later, we can see a nitrate boost of 50 or even 60 parts per million if we are going for that. So having lots of BSA just gives you lots of power in the engine. This is the horsepower of your aquaponics system. So if we're just going to go with kind of the standard crushed granite here, we're just going to assume we're in the range of 50, okay? 50 square feet per cubic feet. And if we want to build, say, an IBC system that will, at maturity, support 25 fish pretty easily, you know, essentially what we're going to have to do then is figure out, you know, at 25 pounds of fish, how much of this media are we going to need? So if we're just going to go with the very bare minimum, 25 square feet of biological surface area per pound of fish, we know that at 50 square feet, that's going to support about, each cubic foot of this is going to support about 2 pounds of fish, right? So that works out to about 12 cubic feet to support 25 pounds of fish. And that's fairly close for an IBC system. Most IBC beds will be about 9 cubic feet to 12 cubic feet, somewhere in that range when it comes to this type of crushed granite. So that's, you know, that's within range of most IBC systems. That's why I say that's fairly standard. Now if we're going up to 100, okay, we need at least 4 grow beds the size of a standard IBC grow bed to support 25 pounds of fish, to really give us the oomph in our system and make sure everything's getting processed well and quickly. So you see how that's done. It's pretty simple. You know, fairly simple stuff. If we were going with this to calculate the actual number of square feet we would need, we know we would need basically 2 cubic feet of crushed granite, okay, at 50. We need 2 cubic feet of that for each pound of fish. So all together we're going to need around 50 cubic feet of crushed granite. That's a lot. It's about 4 grow beds worth. So pretty simple calculation, pretty easy to do once you have these numbers. So I guess just write these down, and when it comes time for you to design your next system or your next grow bed, or you're thinking about whatever, definitely use these numbers. Now one thing I will say, and one reason we really like our media, is you see we don't need a whole lot of it to meet our needs. For say, you know, basically 1 cubic foot of this stuff will pretty easily support all of our fish, right? Because it does have such a high specific surface area. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's why we use our media. It's one of the nice things about fiber medias as opposed to aggregate medias. Alright, well thanks so much for watching, and hopefully that was helpful to you. If you guys have any questions about this stuff, feel free to ask. Also check out the Vertical Food blog. We're going to start posting ebooks and stuff over there that kind of address this stuff, that go into a little more detail and will probably help you with some of the finer points of what we're talking about. Thanks for watching, and if you like our stuff, subscribe. Iron is one of the most abundant elements on the face of the planet, and yet it's oftentimes deficient in aquaponics systems. And the reason for that is that iron is either available or it's not. And that makes